Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Before I get to today's card, I wanted to share with you that My Favorite Things came out with a new line of stencils, and they sent me a few of them to check them out. They asked me to share with you what I thought about them. And so I took some of them out of the packaging here so I can share them with you. This first one is called the Scrolled Background. You can see how pretty it is. It's got a lot of really detailed pattern in it. And what I did with this one, I kind of played around with some of these. I inked it up with white ink on some craft cardstock. And then I rotated it, so as you can see, put it on here and do the white. And then I moved it kind of a little bit upward to the right, and then I did blue, then I moved it back to the center, and then up to the right, or I'm sorry, left, and then I did blue here. So I used kind of the ghosting technique. Came out with this really pretty background. Another thing I tried was with this one. I really love this design. It's a checkerboard, small checkerboard. And you can do so many different things with it. I created just this little piece to show you. So what I did was I first covered it on the white cardstock, and I used some blue ink, and I sponged it on. And then I moved the stencil, so now the blues were covered. See if I can do that here. Yeah, and then I sponged it with purple. So you can create kind of an alternating look. And another thing I thought you could do is you could mask off, you know, just the outside, like a line around the outside to create a border around your card. So just mask the inside. I'll have to try that on one of my future cards. And then there are a couple of other ones. They sent me this kind of cement brick pattern I thought was really cool, especially for Christmas. Maybe you can do something in the background of the fireplace. And then this other chevron pattern, which I thought was also really cool, that you can sort of do similar things that you can do with this checkerboard pattern. Anyway, so the stencil that really caught my eye was this rose builder. And I kind of thought it would be challenging. I put some of that sticky stuff on the back here. I thought it'd be challenging to use one of these roses because it has so many nice intricate lines in it to create a more realistic rose. So rather than just, you know, plain old putting it on some white cardstock and sponging it on there, I decided to do something a little bit more realistic looking. And I created this card just from using that one rose. So stay tuned to see how I made this, but it actually really wasn't very hard to do. So anyway, just wanted to share that with you, and stay tuned for the card video.
Hi everyone, it's Darlene. Welcome to this week's card. Today I'm going to show you how to use this My Favorite Things Build a Rose stencil to create a really nice realistic looking rose. I'm going to use this part of the stencil, and then I'm going to use some Distress ink, worn lipstick ink pad, and a Festive Berries marker, along with some Strathmore watercolor paper. Now, as you can see from these samples here, I tried a bunch of different techniques, and I found one finally that I thought worked really well, so I'm going to show you how to do that one. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is take my stencil. I'm going to put it right on top of my watercolor paper, and I've got this medical tape that I use to hold it down, and this medical tape is just awesome. It's really paper thin tape, and you can use it like a million times and it never gets worn out. So I'm going to take a sponge dauber, put it on my fingertip, and I'm going to go over this rose with some worn lipstick Distress ink. I'm going to be careful because there is some intricate sort of lines in this rose, so I'm using kind of a little bit of a twisting technique, dabbing and twisting with the ink, but the stencil is really high quality, so it's really not moving around very much at all. Alright, now after I created that whole entire rose, I decided that I was kind of going back and forth and really not being very clear in my instructions, so I decided to go ahead and finish off that rose and start a brand new one and show you the technique on this one, because I was just going to show you one anyway. So here I am going through the same technique with this second rose, and I overlapped them, as you can see, so that one would be behind the other, and I just kind of lightly applied my ink over the area where the other rose was. And because it's the same color, it's no big deal. Alright, so the second step in creating this rose is to take a Distress marker. I'm using Festive Berries, and I'm creating it in an outline on the inside of every single petal. And notice that I'm using the fine tip here, and really what I'm doing is I'm just drawing myself a guide for where I'm going to be creating the shadow areas of this rose. So when I take this off, you'll see what the result is. So just kind of a fine line and then some worn lipstick ink. Alright, next step is I'm going to take a watercolor, well, it's just a paintbrush, and some water, and I'm going to put just a little bit of water on my brush. Not too much because I don't want to saturate my paper, and I definitely don't want to put water over the Festive Berries marker. All I'm going to do is take my brush and I'm going to extend the worn lipstick ink into each of the white areas. So as you can see, I'm just kind of pulling some ink into the white, and I want this area to be kind of whitish because that's where you're going to get some definition between one petal and the next petal. And then I'm going to kind of soften out those lines on the side. But again, just being careful to bring the ink out toward the next petal, but not really touch the Festive Berries marker line that I drew. And you can see that I haven't really dipped my brush into water very much, and I wiped it off a little bit on my tissue, because if I do get too much water, it is going to run into that Festive Berries marker, and I don't want it to do that because I want this area to be pretty light. So I'm going to color the whole thing. I actually experimented with leaving some of the areas white, and I decided I didn't like it, so I just colored them all with the Distress ink. So next what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this petal by petal so it's not overwhelming. I'm going to take my Festive Berries marker, and this time I'm going to take the brush tip and I'm going to widen out the fine line that I drew with the stencil, and I'm going to color directly onto my cardstock, and then I'm going to wet my brush and I'm going to pull the color out into the worn lipstick area. And you don't want too much, but you want enough water. You can see it's starting to pool up a little bit. It just kind of depends what kind of look you want. If you want it to be really watercolory, then you can put some extra water on there. Or if you want it to be kind of smooth, which I kind of like mine to be a little smooth because it looks more realistic, is you put a little less water. And the idea is that you want the darkest area to be where your fine tip line is, and then it gets lighter as you get toward the outer edge of the petal. So I'm pulling out here. You can see I'm almost not even touching the very edge where it touches the marker, where the thick part that I pulled out from the fine tip touches marker. I'll show you one more here and pull it out. And as you can see, it's starting to look more like a rose at this point. Now, if you do end up putting too much water, what I did here is I put some of the Festive Berries right there on my craft sheet, and I pulled some marker up from it with my brush. And that just makes sure if you color directly onto the cardstock, you're going to get quite a bit of color on your cardstock. And if you feel like you need just a little bit extra color, you can just dip your brush into the Festive Berries on your craft sheet and get a little bit of color and apply it. So I'm just going to take this one petal at a time so that it doesn't get overwhelming, and just do the same exact thing on each one. Alright, so as you can see, it's not really too hard when you do it one petal at a time. Now here I'm taking my fine tip, and you can add just a little bit. Now everything that I'm doing from this point forward is really optional. You can stop here, but for those of you who have a hard time stopping, this is kind of where you can carry on. I took my fine tip and I made the edges of the petals a little sharper so there'd be more definition between each petal. And then what I decided to do is add a little bit more shadow between my front rows and my back rows, so it looked like my front one was actually in front of the back. And all that you need to do there is to put some more festive berries right on the top of the back rows where it touches the front rows. And I'm doing this a bunch of times because I don't want to put too much, because I've worked so hard on this already. I don't want to mess it up. So I'm just taking a lot of time to do this. But I just decided at the very end right there, okay, I'm just going to put a bunch on there. And then I was happy with it. So you just have to kind of work this until you kind of get the look that you want. And then another thing I did was to add a little bit more definition to the outer edges, because remember, we didn't really pull any of the worn lipstick out from these edge petals, so the outside is just a plain inked worn lipstick. So I'm just adding a little bit of festive berries on the edge to give it a little bit more definition. And again, this is optional. You could have left it, 5 minutes ago. Alright, now this is the step I sort of regret doing, and what I did is I took a Faber-Castell white marker, and this is kind of like an acrylic paint almost, it seems like, and I just dabbed it. I wanted a little bit of a reflection to make it a little more realistic, so I added a couple of dots of this marker, and then I just rubbed it really quickly with my finger. And I think it came out okay, but I probably should have left it. But once you start doing it, then I just kept doing it. So I just added it to a bunch of the different petals going inside. It also kind of added a little bit more texture to it, so it wasn't too bad. Alright, my camera turned off. I don't know what happened exactly, but I just used the other portion of this stencil to do the stems, and I just used peeled paint and a sponge dauber, sponged them on there. I did one, and then to get a different look for the other stem, I just flipped it over and did the other one, but it wasn't long enough, so as you can see, I kind of pulled it downward a little bit to extend it, and it worked out just fine. And then I took some forest moss. You see I'm putting a little bit of shadow where the roses are, and then down the left side, and I'm just coloring this directly to the paper with the marker, and then I'll take my paintbrush with just a little bit of water and kind of pull that color out into the rest of the stem. And then I'll do the same for the other rows. I'm actually going to cut the bottom off of this anyway. And I realized I sponged over the rose with the green, so I just added some more festive berries, and that was fine. Alright, for the final part of this card, I'm going to take some basic gray cardstock by Stampin' Up! And this canvas background by Hero Arts, and I'm going to ink it up with some Versamark. And I always do cardstock to stamp on these big background stamps just because it's easier to manage that way. So I just put my cardstock on top and then a scratch sheet, and I rub it with my finger, and then it comes out with good coverage. Now I'll cover that with some clear embossing powder. This is fine embossing powder, ultra fine I think, by Hero Arts. And heat it to set it and give us this really nice subtle background. So I didn't want something too stark or too interesting. I just wanted to kind of fade in the background so it wouldn't take anything away from my roses. This is the Avery's custom panel set that I'm going to use for the edge. And then I also cut another little piece from that same die, that edge die, and I'm coloring it with a worn lipstick distress marker. And then I also cut another piece for the top so that I would have a top piece and a bottom piece. And I'm just going to glue these pieces on with some Tombow Mono multi-glue, one at the top, and then I'll use my ATG to put my rose panel on there. And then I'll take that bottom one and use the glue again to put it on. And then finally I'm going to stamp my sentiment, which was very nerve-wracking because I was doing it directly to the panel that had the roses on it, but luckily everything turned out just fine. And that's from an Altenew set. I'm just looking at it trying to figure it out. I'm not sure what happened there, but what I ended up doing after the camera turned off, I adhered that to just a 4 1/4 by 5.5 inch piece of solar white cardstock, and that's it for the card. So I hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you next week. Thanks for watching.